I just want to say welcome
Okay,
to the.
so yeah.
So yeah,
Go,
welcome
Mark.
to Northern Nevada Beekeepers Association. This is, what are we at? March 2021. Hard to keep track of dates anymore. First off, I want to say we do record these meetings and post them to YouTube. So if anyone doesn't want their face shown on the internet or anything like that, please feel free to turn off your cameras. We don't feel offended by it by any means. I just want to put that warning out there for everyone that they are recorded and are made publicly available. Other than that, I will give it over to Jim. Let him take it from there.
Okay, so I guess the first thing we're going to do is kind of introduce the board. So my name's Jim Russell, and I'm the president of Northern Nevada Beekeepers this year. And so hopefully by the end of, well, August, September, you know, maybe the Sparks Library will let us back in and we can have in-person meetings. So, okay. Emu?
Hello, everyone. My name is Emu. I am the vice president, and I'm trying to back up Jim as much as I can, although I feel like I'm not doing much, but I hope this will change this season, and I will be also starting to be a mentor this season for the first time, and also having some splits for sale, some nukes. And I'm looking forward to the season and all the new members also in this club. Welcome. I don't know who's next. Stefan.
Hi, I'm Stefan. I'm the mentor coordinator. So if you need a mentor, I will try to find somebody that'll be able to help you. With that being said, all of the folks that are returning, if you would be so kind to be a mentor, that would be great. I am pretty busy this year, so I'm not going to be able to take on as many, I'm not going to be able to mentor as many people as I have in the past. So that would be great. Yeah.
I am Deborah Quackenbush. I am the secretary / event coordinator for the Northern Nevada Beekeepers. And well, we've been sort of uneventful this past year. So my hope is that we get to do some fun things. Everything's still up in the air. So Lavender and Honey Festival, the Earth Days, they're all sort of just waiting to see what the state and the CDC say. So we will keep you posted. But in the interim, if you know of any schools or any organizations that would like to maybe do a Zoom meeting, we could, you know, possibly offer that still. So yeah, so welcome everyone. Pam, you want to go?
Okay. I'm Pam Galantomini. I have all the equipment for the group. That includes the extraction equipment, uncapping knives, forks, the spinner itself, those types of things. Looking into getting a refractometer for the group that could be also checked out. We're going to be ordering one of those. And that's pretty much it. I will be taking on trying to see if we could do a end of the year picnic as we have a couple years past. Once again, it depends on what's happening with COVID, but I can at least check in and see if we can reserve something and then we can go from there. Yeah, so if you ever need anything as far as equipment, give me a call.
Okay, Randy, I guess you're up.
Well, here's looking at you. I'm Randy. I'm the treasurer. You can send your money to me. Welcome, new beekeepers, to the the world of beekeeping with its infinite learning curve. Have fun.
I guess I should introduce myself. I am Mark. I am the social media manager. I take care of kind of posts on the websites and Facebook and all that. And then I also help out with the technology with the club that we have there. And we are working on many different things there. And so if you have questions about that, often I'll be the one that'll respond through your social media.
And I don't know how we'd do it out without you, Mark. Several of us are kind of at the old geezer stage where we don't really do social media too well. I guess along those lines, I'm going to actually call this a business meeting for the next few minutes. So one of the things that our Northern Nevada beekeepers have talked about is looking into becoming a nonprofit, a 501c3. And it may take us a year or two. I guess there's, a lot of hoops you have to jump through. And it does cost a bit of money to file for that. And don't know exactly what it is. I was thinking just for nonprofits around 400. I've heard mentioned it could be as much as 1,400. So I think our club actually has a fair amount in its bank account. I think, Randy, I think you mentioned we have a little over $6,000 right now.
Correct.
So I wanted to ask club members if they would, if they're okay with the club spending up to say $1,500 in the future to become a nonprofit, a 501c3. Everybody just, give a thumbs up on your screen if it's an okay. Okay.
How does that change
Um,
operating? How does that change operating?
Well, it wouldn't really change the club so much, other than it's easier to set up the PayPal, because you either need a business or you need some organization. Otherwise, you have to do it as a personal, a single person. Because we're not really incorporated as a Northern Nevada Beekeeping Association. We just have a name. We're not registered really with the state or anybody. Also, as a club, we will need to get insurance. In fact, many of the events we go to, Deborah brought this up recently, because she's our event coordinator, that the Honey and Lavender Festival in Sparks, the Earth Day, they want your organization to have liability insurance, whether it's umbrella insurance or, some type of club insurance. And in order to get club insurance, we actually have to be recognized as a club. And that's what a 501c3 would do for us.
Excuse me, this is Phil. The other big advantage, if the club becomes a nonprofit, you're able to go out and ask for donations, which would be advantageous for a lot of reasons.
Great. And in fact, Mark mentioned that when he was looking into how we can set up online membership dues being paid. And they also have another spot for if you want to make an additional donation. Being a nonprofit, making a donation then becomes tax deductible. And I don't know if that means a whole lot, since they've kind of changed some of the tax code, that you have to have a lot of deductions in order to actually make the threshold to deduct them. But as you said, Phil, there are other organizations that would be willing to donate to help support an organization that goes out into the public and gives out information about saving bees, and not just the honeybees, which we're kind of doing, but actually have pollinators. And I see that Tilsa just set in chat that she's helped set up some nonprofits. So fabulous. That's kind of what a club does. Everybody has something that they do well and they can contribute. So I'm sure we'll be looking for your help there. So anyway, it looked like we got quite a few people saying yes. And then we kind of got off into a discussion on what it would do for us. Is anybody opposed to spending some money? Okay, I see somebody say annual fees close to $1,500 a year. I was thinking that was a one-time thing, and then we have to file a tax return each year. And usually that doesn't involve much. So actually what we should probably do is we should continue looking into it and finding out what the real total cost would be, and not just as an initial setup, but also as a continuing annual amount. Okay. I don't think we need an accountant. And I also saw that we do have to keep minutes. Yes, we would have to actually have kind of and nonprofits can be expensive. I'm seeing a lot of chat stuff. Okay, well, good. So
expensive. I mean, there's a cost to it, but I think there's benefits. Like we're talking about, that there's donation possibilities. There's other possibilities that would outweigh that cost.
All right. Thanks, Philippe. Okay, so as we get closer, we get more information, we'll bring it back up in a meeting. So at this point, I'm getting the sense that the club is okay with us going forward and researching it. Before we actually make a final decision, we will come back and make sure everybody in the club understands what the total cost would be, what the annual recurring cost would be, et cetera. So we'll just nonprofits. Oh, okay, 501c2. All right. So we'll go ahead as a board and research that more. And like I say, our club also kind of needs insurance no matter what. It's just going to be easier to get it if we're a recognized club, as opposed to putting in to say the president's name, that's my name. I don't know if I want that liability. Okay, so other things in the business meeting. We have a woman who would like to buy beeswax. If anybody has beeswax for sale or extra beeswax, let us know. And she sent some information. We can get a hold of her. What else do I have down here? And then, like Deborah said, we have various organizations that are looking for somebody to come and talk. The Rotary Club in Sparks was looking for a presentation. We have an Eagle Scout project presentation. And I think Mark had already talked about doing that since he's been involved in Scouts for quite a while. I think Mark, you're going to check into that one. Okay, great. Then we have a woman, Barbara Finney, who has contacted the club about seeing if Reno wants to become a bee city, USA. Carson City did that. And I don't know exactly what we would have to do to help out in Reno, but I'm sure we could probably use 3 or 4 or 5 people on a committee to contribute to that. Okay, Deborah, any more things on the social agenda that might be happening?
Not at this moment. As I mentioned earlier, we're still in limbo as to what we can and cannot do. I've gotten several requests again to ask if we're doing in-person presentations, but I can't commit again until we have that clarified. Regarding Barb Finney and her project for the Bee City, I reached out to her, but I have not heard back from her. So yeah, she's definitely looking to get volunteers. Maybe next meeting she can maybe speak to that a little bit more.
Yes, I know Barb. She's a neighbor of mine. We actually did a project together in front of the city council.
Yeah, she
year.
mentioned you. Yeah.
Yeah, there was, yeah. And so I can get in contact with her and maybe be on that committee too to get that started. That sounds like also a bit of paperwork, and I think you also have to pay an annual fee to become a Bee City USA. So you have to renew that every year, I think, and also pay something. But it might be an interesting thing to do also to just promote the protection of pollinators more out there.
Okay. And, you know, since it's a bee city for Reno, we might get the city of Reno to actually contribute to that also. So it sounds like that's a kind of a research project that we're going to have to look into. All right. A couple other things. Pam mentioned a end of year picnic she's going to be looking into. I think, Pam, you said that they still require at least a 6-month reservation in advance, whether it happens or not.
Right, usually it's a 6-month window, so I'll contact the Washoe County. I thought we would still do it as we have in the past couple years at the Washoe State Park out at Washoe Lake. That's nice and open. When I contact them, they would probably be able to tell me what kind of restrictions or if that can be done or not, or if we're still in kind of limbo because it is so far out. I can report to everyone at the next meeting on my findings.
Okay, great. And we were thinking mid-September, something like that, and hopefully
that's what we've usually done is like the first within the first 2 weeks of September, most everybody's got their honey extracted. And that's a pretty still nice time in September to, as far as weather goes.
And this year, also pretty much all the vaccinations will have happened.
Hopefully.
Your honey extraction, everything. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to reiterate is if you had bees that made it through the winter, and they're out buzzing around right now, you qualify as a mentor. Yes, if you have bees that you were able to get to live through the winter, even if it's just one hive, you can be a mentor. And contact Stefan because he needs to put together a list for all of our newcomers. Because we have several people that took recent classes, or they thought about getting bees last year, but they didn't because of COVID, and now they're getting them this year. And everybody's pretty hesitant. Luck, I like that, Philippe. Yes, it was luck if you made it through winter. Yeah.
If you're interested in being a mentor, you could also post it in the chat.
Okay. Great. And I see that Stefan just put down his email that you can send him something direct in case you don't want to actually have your name right out in front of everybody. Okay, so and usually we try to hook you up with somebody in your area. You know, so I'm kind of North Reno, and so I don't really want to drive all the way down to Galena type thing. So we usually try to work on you know, setting up people who are close by. Okay, any other issues for our business meeting here?
Were you going to touch on updating the swarm list?
Oh, yes. Okay, good point. So the swarm list out on our website is pretty old, and we've actually gotten a couple of folks that said they want to be taken off the swarm list. And some of you may actually want to get put on the swarm list because it is free bees. You just have to go out and catch them. Oh, okay. And I just saw a message come in. Who do we send our dues to? Randy is our treasurer, and yes, in the newsletter, there's actually an address in there to send them. NNBA and the address. So that's where dues go, at least until we can get it set up where you just click on a PayPal and send it in. The board decided that we would go ahead and leave the dues at 25, even though PayPal takes a small percentage off of that, so the club gets a little less than the 25. But it also saves a lot of time for Randy, our treasurer, if we can just get things automated. But in the meantime, yep, send a check, cash. Stefan, are you
Yeah, so I've noticed that a couple people are saying they want to be on the swarm list. So if you want to do that, then email the club's email account and just say that you want to be on the swarm list, what areas you want to be in. That way, when we compile that, we can get that ready. Same with people that want to sell bees this year and be in the newsletters. That would help us out just to get that all organized. And then just let us know what areas also for swarms.
right? Just like in being a mentor, you know, if you don't want to drive to Carson City to pick up a swarm, just say I just want to do North Reno and Sparks, or you know, the Monte Ranch in Galena or something. Just let us know what area you're interested in for the swarms. Okay, and club's email address. Good point. Stefan, do you have that? Because it looks like Mark has stepped away for a second.
I'm here. I'll post it.
You'll post it. Oh, you are there. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so in the chat in just a couple seconds, the club email address. So we need two things from people. If you want to be on the swarm list or taken off the swarm list, and then if you do want on the swarm list, what areas you're willing to go out and drive to. And then the other thing that the club needs to know is, are you going to be selling bees? Okay, so I know that Vicky and Bill, you mentioned you were gonna have some. I know that Stefan, you're gonna have some. Emu, you said you'd have some. I'm gonna have a couple. In fact, I'm thinking about selling a couple of my hives, the complete hive, screen bottom board, couple of boxes, inner cover. Mainly because my next door neighbors, they had a baby last year and he's gonna be like 1.5 or so this summer. And he's gonna be running around in the backyard barefoot. And so I told him I would kind of narrow my hives down to just 2. And I had more than that make it through the season. So I'm gonna have to sell some of them off into slavery. Or for somebody else to look after. All right, so anyway, I know that there's gonna be quite a few people in the club that will have bees for sale. And in fact, once we get through the business meeting here, we're gonna talk about how you can take your hive that made it through winter and double it, or triple it, or more. I think a couple years ago, Michael, our past president, talked about splitting one of his hives 5 times. He said it was just incredibly prolific and he just couldn't stop him. He just had to keep dividing them up. So it's possible to get more beehives than you'll ever need or want. All right, so I guess that brings me to kind of the end of the business meeting. Anything else? Did I forget anything? Thanks, Pam, for reminding me about swarm list in the business meeting. Okay, nobody has spoken up. All right. Oh, no, okay. Well, then I'm going to close our business meeting. And we will go on to our presentation. So we were going to talk about swarms, how to catch them. In the newsletter, I actually sent out not just the newsletter, but also another PDF file on what I called swarm vetting questions. So questions that you ask when somebody calls up and says, I've got a swarm. You pull out the sheet, you go ahead and print it out off your PDF, and you start asking them the questions. Is it bigger than a basketball? Is it kind of in between a basketball and a football? Is it the size of a softball?
Meet in the morning, and I said, well, we have racks, and she said, well,
okay, and there were several other different questions to ask. How high up is it? Do I need a ladder? Once you start getting into ladders, then you really have to, think about safety. Am I going to be able to get up there? All these bees flying around, get in with a little cardboard box or something, knock this swarm into the box, climb down the ladder, and put them into your hive box. Is your balance okay? It's like a trip to the ER is going to cost a hell of a lot more than you'd spend on a package of bees. Okay, so I know we all want to save the bees because I guess the odds of a swarm surviving are about 20% out in the wild. Good 80% of swarms don't make it. They cannot find an empty hollow in a tree. They, you know, land on somebody's eaves in the house. The person that is in the house, they go out and they spray them because they don't want bees inside their wall. So, you know, a swarm that takes off, it doesn't have a great chance of survival unless we go out and rescue them and get them into a hive box and take them home and feed them and, you know, tuck them into bed and tell them that they're loved. So anyway, swarms, those questions that were in the newsletter are very important. You know, how long have they been there? You know, is this their third or fourth day there? And are they making some white comb already? If that's the case, they're going to be pretty cranky because they have no food. They've burned up all the food that they took with them when they swarmed. Are you going to be able to carry them? You know, it's like I had a box. You know, I caught the swarm, got them down into the box, and waited till dusk so that all the foragers came back and got down in the box. I closed it up, ratchet tied it nice and tight, set it in the back of my truck. I didn't ratchet tie it into the truck. Somebody pulled out in front of me, fast stop, boom, lid slides off, bees everywhere. It's like, you know, I learned, okay? It's like, I don't do that anymore. I take a couple ratchet ties. In fact, if you're gonna be doing swarms, you're gonna wanna have this stuff in your car, in the trunk. You're gonna be driving around all spring and early summer with, you know, a white sheet that you can put down underneath this, cardboard box, ratchet ties, possibly a deep with frames that are going to have some drawn out comb, maybe even some frames with just a little honey around the edge. You know, that's going to attract this swarm to get in there and stay. You know, so there's a lot of things to be thinking about if you're going to go out and catch a swarm. You have to take the ladder with you, etc. Anybody want to jump in? Anybody who's been out on swarm calls and has an interesting story?
Oh, I saved a couple
Stefan,
of
I know you have.
swarms last year during the summer. They were small, but you know, they were still a meaningful size. So it was nice to get out there. And yes, I got my bucket of tools, my white sheet, and also, you know, it gives an opportunity to do a little education too to the person that calls, because they're so fascinated. You know, it's a learning opportunity. So yeah, if you do catch swarms, you know, take some pictures too and send it to us. We like to hear the stories. Yeah, I think 2 swarms I caught. I know I think I work with Talissa. We caught one of my own swarms in my neighbor's yard, and I just had too many bees, and she was able to take those for herself, and it was a great teaching experience too. So it was nice to do that.
We had so many swarms last year. I think we had at least 8 swarms. They kept going up in our pine tree. We kept going up and collecting them until I ran out of every bit of material I had. And not on the last swarm, because I still had more after that, but I was able to get more frames. I had to call Stefan out and pick that one up. That was a good one. So we don't have experience going to people's houses, but we sure have experience collecting swarms.
So you just have that pine tree that they love, and
They love it.
they just all go there.
Yeah, and Bill had to climb up in it on a ladder and he had to strap himself to the tree so that because he had to reach out to collect them, out with the box. I collected the swarm that went in the 3-foot lilac tree and into the sagebrush. Those were the ones I got.
Yeah, the 3-foot high. Okay.
Yeah, those were, they were huge. They were so big.
Wow. Delphi box. So you mentioned Bill having to strap himself to the tree. So that, like I say, I carry extra ratchet ties, and I have an extension ladder, which, you know, is not one of the folding A-frame type that you get up into the tree, and especially if it's kind of a small tree that will bend 40 feet in the wind. I will take a ratchet tie up with me and I will ratchet tie the top of this ladder onto the tree.
Right.
So even if it moves and the bottom slips somewhere, at least the ladder is still tied onto the tree and I'll be able to get down. Because sometimes I get off that ladder and I work my way out onto a branch to get the swarm, and then back scooching along the branch to the ladder and then down. So I want to make sure that ladder is going to be there when I get back to it. So yeah,
with the box
ratchet ties.
Yeah.
One time he was, one swarm he was collecting the same tree, and he reached out to get them. And when he give him a shake, I'm holding the ladder, and instead of going in the box, they all came down on me, and which was kind of fun. But I had my suit on, so no big deal. But it's still seeing all those bees flying in my face was like, oh, hello.
Right, and it's just, you know, raining bees. They just a bunch of them drop.
They all marched right into the box. Every single one of them.
So I have a couple things with swarms is if you have a tree like Bill and Vicky do that the bees always go to, that is a place that you might want to put a swarm trap because they will go to that same spot every single year. Something about the way they are, bees just like the same areas to swarm at. I was gonna say something else, but I don't. Oh, when you do a swarm, collect a swarm that's not in your location, you need to expect that you're going to leave that equipment there at least until the evening. Depending on the situation, you know, if it's near where they originally came from, you can swarm or you can shake those bees, walk away with them. The ones that return, they'll go back to the original hive. But if you don't know where those original bees came from, then you'll want to leave that equipment there for at least a couple hours to collect as many as you can. Old comb works really good for keeping them inside whatever you're catching them in, whether it's a deep or a nucleus hive. If you don't have old comb, a couple drops of lemongrass does really good. But you want to just make sure they all, or the majority of them, are in there before you leave. Otherwise, you'll end up with a bunch of scouts returning. So I did actually do a little presentation, if you want me to do that, Jim, about swarm prevention, swarms, and then doing splits. So.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Another thing I just remembered that when you go out, you can always turn it down and say, no, I'm not going to do it. If it's too high, it's too dangerous. If it is close to a school, okay. The thing is, if they call you and you're the beekeeper going out, you are the expert. You are the one that's going to get this swarm. And if it's, say, close to a school and any of the kids get stung, you know, their parents are going to come after you. So just remember that if you go on a swarm and you're the beekeeper, you are the expert. As Deborah said, it's a great chance to actually give information, tell people about bees, you know, and what they do, how important they are. But you're the one that's responsible for capturing this swarm and making sure that you've set it up where it's going to be safe for the rest of the public. So don't feel bad if you get out there and you realize that this is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. Just say, nope, this is beyond anything I can do. Okay. Another thing is that if it's in a house or inside a wall or in an attic, and you have to cut something out, if you're not a licensed contractor, there may be issues there. So Barb Smith, I noticed you came on and you mentioned some stuff. So you're kind of the best person I can think of that knows how to do swarm capture in tight places.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. It was very difficult, and I don't think I would do it again. I was just excited, and that's why I went in there. But I don't think I would do it again.
Okay. Well, you also had that special vacuum, a bee vac.
Yes, I do have a bee vac, and it has helped in tight places where you are reaching out and away from your ladder. And so, but you do kill a lot of bees with that vac because as the bees are going through the tube, they're full of honey. And as they're going through the tube, they're going to burst easier. So you lose about, I don't know, maybe 15%, 10% of your bees. And you hope the queen makes it through the tube without damage.
Right. Okay. That's another really good point, is that if you capture this swarm, you know, you get up underneath it, you shake the branch they're on, they all drop into your box. Usually I use a cardboard box because I'm usually up a ladder or on a tree. I get them in a cardboard box, I quickly fold the tabs and then get down, and then I turn it upside down on my regular hive box with the frames. If the bees stay in there, then most likely you got the queen, because the queen's going to be in the middle of that ball. They're all swarmed around her, protecting her. So if you can kind of get most of that ball of bees down and into your hive box, odds are that you've captured the queen and hopefully didn't damage her. Like Barb said, having them suck through a vacuum tube and they're bouncing off the wall of that tube sometimes doesn't work out too well for them.
When I do go out for swarms, I only use a cardboard box because it's lightweight. And I close up 3 of the tops and leave 1 open so that you got that crack open. And I use a queen excluder. So once I get the big bulk into the box, I put the queen excluder on top with the 1 flap open and put it on the ground. And everybody comes home. And so, and you don't mind leaving a cardboard box behind, you know, so you're not leaving your equipment. You're not hauling heavy equipment around. You just have your cardboard box. Then once everybody's in the box that evening and you leave that queen excluder on top and you close the 1 flap and still leave the queen excluder, now you can put it in the car and you just put something over it. Like I have a net that I put over it and they travel really well.
Okay, any other people want to talk about swarms they've captured or methods they use?
Yeah, I'll just mention something. So last year I was helping my dad with his hive, and it was in one corner of his yard, and his neighbors back there weren't happy they got stung occasionally. Don't know why, but for some reason they got stung. So we were moving his hive, and he always has his hives just sitting on cinder block bricks. In this case, he had it so the holes were facing the ground on the bottom of the hive, and we did so. We found that at one point his hive had swarmed and moved into that little hole in the bottom of the bricks. We were having troubles with his hive, none of that, but that little swarm ended up being his best one. It's made it through the winter so far this year and everything. So you just never know where you're gonna find little bee swarms at or where they'll move into. So kind of, if you have them in your area, check around, check underneath your bottom of your hive. If you have kind of hidden gaps or anything, because you may have a hive there and not even know it.
All right.
What also helps, I think, in case your own bees want to swarm, put up an empty box out there, and maybe a few drops of lemongrass oil, and that is also very inviting. If one of your bees want to swarm, they might just swarm right back into that free box there and be happy to find a new home.
That's a good point. So I will leave a box, you know, with frames in it and a cover, but in an opening, and I'll put it over on the other side of the yard because they don't like to move into something that's like right next to where they're at. They like to go out and look for another spot, and so you know, even 50 feet across the yard in the other corner. It is a great place. And like Stefan said, if you can figure out a way to put a box up in a tree, you probably end up using one of the cardboard nuke boxes as opposed to, you know, heavy wood whole hive. But you know, if you've got a tree that they constantly swarm into, putting a swarm capture box up there would be a great idea. Okay. Well, so Stefan, you were saying you'd worked up a bit of a program on splits then.
Yeah, so I do. Oops. Yeah, so if I can share my screen, need Mark to let me do that. Is Mark
Okay,
there?
you're good.
All right, thanks. So before you come to splits, you need to get yourself ready for swarm prevention, which is what I was starting out here. And so let's, is everybody seeing my screen okay?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Okay. So really what it comes down to is you need to listen to what your hive is telling you. You need to see where your bees are in that hive, what space they have available to them. Is the hive making drones? If they're making drones, do you see queen cells? You know, is the swarm imminent or not? These are important before you even decide whether you're going to make a split. You need to do proper swarm prevention. So if the bees have worked their way, like if you have two boxes and they've worked their way up to the top and the bottom box is completely empty with no brood, but just bees in it, you'll want to swap those around. But mature drones is the key for making splits for swarm prevention. You really need to become diligent once you start seeing mature drones in the hive. From this one picture over here, you can see, sorry. Oh, it's not cooperating with me. Anyhow, even if they've gotten to a point where they have queen cells at the bottom, you can make splits off of that, and that will keep them from swarming. You need to take away their desire to swarm. Find the queen, remove the queen. And I was going to talk a little bit about catching swarms. We pretty much talked about it already.
Okay, can I
yeah,
jump in there?
Sure.
Okay, so back to the looking at what you have in your hive. So previous slide there. Yeah, so what's the hive saying? So drones, that's the big thing. Once you see those swarm cells on the bottom, you can actually split right then, and you can take that whole frame out. Okay, so like Stefan says, you have to find your queen. You cannot move that frame to another box if the queen's on it. Also, with all of those swarm cells there, you can actually cut out some of those swarm cells and make several different splits. Because basically those are going to be queens that are coming out, and you can put them in a small nuke box with maybe even just one other frame of nurse bees. Cut that cell out and just kind of push it into the honeycomb, and the nurse bees will take care of it. And oh yeah, how do you cut them out when they're that tight? Well, it looks like I've got groups of 2, and I would just cut out 2 together. Oh yeah,
yeah,
ahead,
a very sharp, small, flexible knife. I don't do that much anymore, but when I do, that's what I use. And like Jim was saying, I would just take 2 at a time, because you want to make sure that there is a viable queen in whatever split you make. And so one of those cells might not be viable and you don't realize it. So no point in wasting resources making a split if they're not viable. So I would, in this situation, I would cut the 2, and then the next 2, although that one looks like it's already merged, the next 2, and then I would leave those last 2 that are on, and so I would make 4 splits with that frame right there. Unless the hive had more viable cells, and then I might just cut off in half those and throw them away, and then make more splits that way. So.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's a good point also, that you could cut some of those off and throw them away. That's another way to keep them from swarming. So we're still on swarm prevention here. Because if the hive has these queen cells, that is their signal to go ahead and swarm, and the old queen and half of those bees are just going to take off. So that's why it's important to find that queen, make sure she's not on here, and get rid of those cells. So some books you'll read actually talk about just cutting all of those swarm cells out and just tossing them.
So what happens in this kind of a situation is you're beyond the point of actually preventing a swarm. So in order to keep those bees from being in the tree, you have to do what's called a forced swarm, which is where you go in, you'll find the queen, you remove her and you make a split with her resources, bees, whatever she needs, but make sure there's no queen cells in there. And then to make sure that hive is not too big, what I would do personally is I would either make 2 splits or 4 splits. I would take half the queen cells, knock off all but a couple of them, make 1 hive, shake over a whole bunch of bees, and then in the original hive, make sure they have plenty of space and some resources, cut off all of those cells, and leave them, 4 or so. Because if you don't, if you see a situation like this, a frame like this, and this actually, the whole picture has queen cells all along the entire bottom, they're gonna shoot out cast swarms, which are secondary swarms with virgin queens, and you'll end up having the hive completely swarm out. It's a big risk that you don't want to take on, because that hive won't produce any honey, and that will, it's just that hive is worthless for a year, and a lot of times they end up not getting a queen for themselves. They'll think they have a viable queen cell left, and then for whatever reason they don't. So if it's at that point, if they're making queen cells, you have to force a swarm. You have to do a forced swarm. You're beyond the point of preventing a swarm. Preventing a swarm is making sure they have enough space, make sure that they don't feel crowded, and it's really, especially here in Reno, where you have such a massive resource hit in the spring, it's almost impossible to keep them from swarming. You have to do splits. So, yeah.
Right, move that queen and several of her frames and a lot of bees to a new box, set her somewhere else where they think they've swarmed. That's like Stefan's saying, it's a forced swarm. You just take her and you move her, and you hope that these other queen cells actually hatch and get out on their mating flight. So that's why it's real important to make sure there's drones available.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Stefan. I wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, no problem. And we went over swarms already. If anybody has any more questions about that, we can cover it. One thing I want to say is, when I do swarm captures, I'm really picky. I will not get on any more than the 5-foot ladder that I carry with me. I have to have easy access to it. If the bees have been poisoned at all, I won't. I'm very particular. This particular swarm here, as you can see, was right on the ground. I literally set a nuke box underneath it with a frame of comb and then empty frames, and they just crawled right in. It was the easiest swarm I'd ever done in my entire life. And since those were next to my bees, or bees I was already working, I just did that when I showed up. And by the time I left, they'd all gotten in the box, and I just took it away. Didn't have to worry about it. But tools you need to, if you have to cut it out of a tree, you want to bring some clippers. You'll want to make sure you have a way to confine them once you got them captured. And a lot of people like to use a sheet or a tarp underneath them when they have to shake them out of a tree. That works well. It doesn't matter for the bees, but it matters for you, so that you don't step on them when they're on the ground, because they're easier to see on like a white sheet or a canvas tarp. Making splits, so.
Right. And if they're on the ground, they will crawl up your pant leg and then sting you on your ankles. So that has happened to me before, because I just wear regular pants, and I don't put a rubber band on. So having that white sheet just makes a big difference.
Okay, so along those lines, part of swarm prevention is making your splits. And when I make splits, these are the two main things that I look for when I'm preparing to make splits. Is there mature drones? Not just cap drones that should be emerging soon, but I want mature flying mateable drones before I even start making splits, because you want to make sure that your queens, the new queens, will be well mated. And if your hives aren't producing, they won't mate with your bees anyways, but if your hives aren't producing drones, other hives aren't either. So if you make them too early, they won't get mated, and then you'll end up with a bunch of failed queens. And then the other thing is, I make sure that my hives have plenty of resources with bees in all stages. I want eggs, I want young larvae, I want old larvae, I want a queen, I want drones, I want lots of workers. I want to make sure that when I make the split that I'm going to have strong, viable splits. If you make a split too weak or too early in the season, so for me, when I make a split and I'm making them for nukes to sell, I want that hive to be laying, building out, completely built out and ready to sell within a month and a half. And if you only pull out one frame and don't give them enough bees, they're not going to produce a quality queen. They're not going to build out in time. And then you end up sitting on a nuke that for 2 months before it actually gets to a point where it's viable to either use as a hive or sell. So bees, you need bees. Yeah, so there's 2 types of splits you can do. You can do walkaway splits. These are pretty easy. You just have to make sure, like if you have 2 boxes and you don't want to look for the queen, you just make sure that you have frames with eggs and larvae in both sides. Make sure that there is capped brood, honey and pollen in both splits, because wherever the queen is, you need to make sure whatever the other one is able to survive, and they won't be able to do it if you don't leave them capped brood and honey. So making sure that they have this in both halves will make sure that both splits will do well. And then once you do that, the bees will make a queen in whatever hive the queen wasn't in. It saves you from having to look for the queen if you have trouble finding those. I have I don't have problems finding the queen. So, but if you do have problems with queens, walkaway splits are really easy to do.
Okay, so with walkaway splits, you do have to recognize an egg that is 1 to 3 days old. After that, the eggs hatch and they become larvae. So you have to know that those are newly laid eggs, because that's the only thing that bees are going to be able to make a queen out of. So walkaway split, you have to have those fresh 1 to 3 day old eggs so that they can make their own queen.
Yeah, so the hive will make or the bees will make a new queen with any exposed larva. They will, if they have to, they will technically make a queen, but she won't be the most healthy queen. So you want larva that has emerged from that egg within 12 to 24 hours. Those are the best queens when the bees are making queens for you. So that's why I say eggs and larvae in both halves, because if for whatever reason they don't like the larva that's in there, if there's eggs, then there will be within a few days the eggs and larvae of the right age to become queens. All right. And then the other is plan splits. When I do plan splits, you must find the queen. If you have a problem with finding the queens, then you might want to just stick with walkaway splits. But you need to find the queen. You need the minimum when you make a split is you need a frame with eggs and larvae. You'll need a resource frame that has honey and pollen. You'll want to shake extra bees into that split. And then I always try to give them a frame of capped brood to make sure that they will have plenty of bees. If I'm just trying to take some of the strength away from the hive, then I'll put the queen back in. If not, then if I'm worried that they're getting ready to swarm, like they're starting to develop queen cells, I will pull that queen out with a frame of capped brood. I won't give her any eggs and larvae, just a frame of capped brood, a frame with a honey and pollen, and empty frames. They will build up in no time at all. So, and then
okay.
So these are, yeah.
I was going to add that you mentioned shaking the bees in there. So that is a great thing to do, because when you shake bees from the old hive that you're splitting into the new one, a lot of the bees will drop in there. Any of the bees that are old enough to fly will return to the original hive. They'll come back out and they'll fly off, and they've already oriented to their other hive. The bees that stay are the young nurse bees. which you actually are going to need in this new nuke box. So the nurse bees have not started flying. They have not gone out on an orientation flight. So they don't really know where they live. You know, in another week or two, they'll get to the point where they go out on an orientation flight, and then that's their new home. So don't worry about shaking too many bees into your split, because half of those bees you shake in there are probably going to be foragers anyway, and they'll leave and they'll go back to their other hive.
Yep.
Okay,
And I mean,
Barb just came up with a good question. Is it wise to shake a frame?
oh yeah. Yeah, it doesn't hurt them. So I mean, I wouldn't shake queen cell. I wouldn't shake a frame that has queen cells on it, because though queens are very fragile. But any other frame, as long as as long as you know where the queen's at, I would. So if I was going to put a frame of eggs and larvae in there, I'd make sure that frame was covered in there, and then I would grab another frame right next to it that has eggs and larvae, and I would shake that frame on top of that split, because most of those bees will stay, except for the older ones will return, and I'll just put that back into the original hive, and they'll cover it back up again, so it's not a problem. I mean, I wouldn't shake it like it was an earthquake or something, but just shaking off the bees isn't going to be a problem. So. And then what's really important is you need to make sure that your split worked. So I made up a little timetable for what to look for. 2 days after your split, you want to look for cells. Make sure that they're producing cells. If they're not, then you either have a queen in there that you didn't realize, or you didn't put young enough eggs and larvae in there. And so the way to remedy that is you look for the queen. And if you don't find a queen in there, then go back to the original hive, or go back to where you have eggs and larvae, shake off the bees and put them in there, and then start again 2 days later, check to see if you have queen cells. When I do splits at 9 days after I make the split, I go in and I remove all the cells except for 2 or 3 to 4 cells. But they all have to be on the same frame. So I won't leave. So if I have 2 frames that have cells on them, one of the frames I will completely remove all the cells, and the other one I will just leave the best looking 3 to 4 queen cells close to each other on one frame. The reason is that I don't want them to shoot out a secondary swarm, because if you accidentally shake in too many bees, they will try to swarm. It's not super common, but it could happen. And then the first queen to emerge, she'll kill the other cells, so it won't be a problem. Then you got one. So then that's the last I check it until after the queen has made her mating flights. But just so you know what's going on is 10 to 11 days after the split, that queen will emerge. 14, 18 days after you make the split, she'll go out for mating flights. That's super weather dependent. So if you have bad weather, it could push that out for up to 3 weeks. But this is just an idea. So she'll do her mating flights. 20 to 26 days, she'll start laying. And that's when I go in and check. When she should start laying, I will go in like on the 20th day, then I'll go in on the 23rd day, and then on the 26th day, just to see if she's laying. And then once I know when she's starting laying, I just leave her alone for a week. And that's because I want to make sure that she's well mated. And the way to ensure that is that you check her capped brood. If her capped brood is worker brood, then you know that she's well mated, or at least that she is mated. And then, but if you go in, and because the queen will start laying, and if her brood is, even if she doesn't get mated, then she'll become a laying or a drone layer, and then she'll start laying drones. And at that point, you have to, personally, I just shake them out and start over. But it doesn't happen very often, but if it does, that's what I do. And so basically after 34 days, if that hive does not show that it has a well-mated queen. If she doesn't look, she doesn't look healthy, if there's any problems in there, after 30 days or so, I just shake it out and start over. There's no point in wasting your time trying to play with a sickly hive, unless you just like experimenting, go for it. But as far as if you're wanting quality bees, then it's not worth it. This one queen up in the top corner, this is pretty common for young queens. They'll have more tiger striped looks to them. And then they end up getting more monocolored, like the bottom two queens, after they're, a month or two old. So just if you're curious. And I think that's all I got for you.
Okay, so before you take that slide away, I recommend that anybody who's kind of new to this, take a picture of that, because those days are very, very important. These are insects that run on an instinct, and the days, you can just count exactly the number of days, and they're at that cycle. So you want to be in there looking, if it says you go in and check after 9 days, if it's not happening, it did not happen. It's like 20 to 26, that gives you a bit of leeway. That kind of goes back to whether she made it right away, or whether, the weather was a little iffy and she didn't go out on a mating flight till a little later. But in bees, like I say, they're an instinctual insect, and they just happen on a cycle, on a certain number of days. That's what they do. So if you're planning on doing a split, take a picture of this for the number of days, because you're going to want to adhere to that.
So there's a lot of calendars out there. This one I don't use except for demonstration. If everybody's ready, I'll take down, then I can show you this here. That's all right. All right. So this here. Oh. Well, give me just a second. Let me turn off my my video in the back. So what this is it's a calendar. And so basically, if I was making splits on the first, I would be doing my grafting or my split on if I'm doing it on the first of the month. And so that's here. And so basically, you just follow this calendar. This is what it's going to look like. You don't mess with them. This is when you check to see if they've emerged. Here's their mating pattern. And then here, if you don't start seeing good patterns, it's time to replace that queen. You also have a nice little scale on the bottom where you can write your dates to help you figure them out. So this one I don't really use. I use an online one to keep track of them because I have too many to keep track of. But this is just a nice idea, something that I use for demonstrations. So look up a queen grafting calendar. You don't actually have to do queen grafting to have that calendar, but it will help you to see when you need to, because it is really important. If you don't go in there on day 9 after the split or the graft, by day 10 it's too late, and if there was too many queens in there, then they're swarming and it's not going to work. So it's really important that when you do make splits that you keep on top of these calendars. Walkaway splits aren't as important, but if you are making nucleus colonies to sell, it's really easy to overwhelm them. And then this also informs your checking. So in the summertime, basically from the beginning of April until the end of June, early July, you need to check your hives at least every 10 days to make sure they're not swarming. I just do it on a week schedule because it's easier for me to just plan that I'm going to go to every place and check every box. And I don't do a full inspection. I just pull off the honey supers. I tilt the box, check if it's two deeps, then I'll check him, tilt each box. And I'm just looking for queen cells. Those queen cells will be on the bottom. If they're actually on the frames themselves, I'm not really too worried. It means they're probably replacing the queen for whatever reason. I don't worry about it. I know that I do lose a few swarms here and there, but it's not my biggest concern is that they swarm out. And so they're not going to swarm out if I'm checking. And then if I do see queen cells or I see them preparing to do queen cells, by the time you notice that the bees are preparing to swarm, it's too late. You got to make preparations to force that swarm because they have been thinking about it long before you realize they were thinking about it. So if you can't mitigate them, you need to, yeah. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever set up swarm traps and have success, like setting up a swarm trap and then checking it regularly, like in a different area, not around your place by chance, or?
So I don't really bother with swarm traps too often, but I do manage some bees for a fellow that keeps swarm traps around, and I do pick up a lot of swarms, and they're not always his, but they do capture a lot of swarms. They're kind of a pain for the beekeeper, but those cardboard upside down pots that they use for swarm traps work really well, especially with queen pheromone in them. But I don't really bother with swarm traps just because I don't care, I guess.
And I've just used the extra box with, some frames with drawn out comb and maybe a little honey sitting over at the edge of the yard. And all of a sudden you'll notice bees are coming in and out, and you look in and there's a big ball of them in there, they've moved in. So that seems.
So if you are doing
about every
swarm
couple
traps,
years, I catch a swarm.
One thing that they do say is if you're looking to set up swarm traps, they like them to be, you want to make them easily accessible for you. So right about your height on a tree, you want them to be able to be in shade. Bees don't like to get the beating sun all day long. So shady spots work well. Not too shady, but just not like in a tree is fine, but if not like hidden under your basement somewhere, and lemongrass works well. Just a chunk of old comb works well too. You just want it to smell like home. You'll get bees. Bees will move into the size of box you have available. So if you're setting up nuke boxes, you're going to get small swarms. If you're setting up full size, 10 frame boxes, then you'll get bigger swarms. One gentleman I know does really well with a 10 frame deep and then a medium underneath it. And so he only puts frames in the 10 frame deep, and then the rest he leaves empty, and he catches several swarms a year out of each of those. So
Yeah, the ones I set up are 8 frame boxes they have the deeps are drawn out comb, but then I also put several medium with no comb on them, some medium frames in there too, just to leave them some space. And I set up a few of those my mom has property up in Idaho and there's a bunch of these up there, so I don't know. I just tried to make some myself, what would happen.
Yeah, I think you'll probably do well. Linda had a question about walkaway splits with a mated queen. So if you're going to introduce a mated queen, you would want to do a plan split. So you will want to know where the queen is. You can't do a walkaway split and just look for queen cells, because by that point the bees have already decided they're making a new queen, and you introducing a queen will cause them to kill that mated queen. But if you pull away a split and you know the queen is in the original hive, you can set it right next to the other one. It's not a problem at all. When we want these distances between bees, those make us feel better. The bees don't care at all.
When you do a split, a walkaway split, and you've got the two deeps, or do you put the split that you took with the bees in the top or the bottom, on the top or on the bottom of the new hive?
So when I do a walkaway split like that, I would take both deeps and I would just make sure they have equal resources and equal amounts of bees, and then I would just separate them. I wouldn't add any more boxes until I knew where the queen was. Once I know where the queen is, then I'll add an extra box. If they're making a new queen, I'll leave it as a single, because I don't want them to have to try to keep warm and protect that extra space, because they're gonna end up really low on bees by the time that new queen starts to pick up. So.
And then does that go on the top or the bottom once you add your new, and how long does it take? A month before you put a new box on? I realize you've got to check and see if they're, doing what they're supposed to be doing, but does that?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll be looking once that queen has started laying and that she's starting to build up a brood section, I'll evaluate how many seams of bees. So in between two frames, that would be the seam. So if she only has 5 to 6 seams of bees, then I will leave her until she has 7 to 8, 9, and then I'll add on top another box for her. Because I don't want to have too much space, and I do a lot of splits early on. And so if I give them too much space, then they might lose brood because of it getting cold. But in the summertime, when it doesn't get below 60 degrees at night, it's not as big of a deal to, once she starts laying, just throw another box on there. As long as she doesn't, as long as she has 3 or 4 seams of bees, they'll figure it out. But too early in the year and you'll end up freezing them.
So when you do the split, then you'll have two, like currently I've got 2 deeps. And if I do a split, then I would have 1 deep and 1 deep until they start to do their thing. And then once I recognize that, then I put another deep on top of each of those. Is that true?
Well, you would put a deep on top of the hive that has the queen in it. The hive that is making a new queen from the walkway splits, you'll want to wait until they make a new queen and she's laying, and then they have adequate bees in there before you add. Did that answer your question?
I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't even know the right question to ask to get the right answer, but I'm getting it between all this conversation and YouTube. And I'm going to ask if anyone is willing to have me come over and help them do something so that I can learn about what's going on and how to do it. That would benefit me tremendously, and I'm more than happy to help them do whatever work they need to do to help to do that, so that I can observe what they do and how they do it.
Well, I do, because I do a lot of the mentoring. When you are, because you have bees already, so when you're ready to make those splits, if you let me know, and by what we were pointing out in the presentation, do they have drones? Do they have good numbers? Do they have plenty of resources? And once you feel ready to make splits with that, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to walk people through doing that. If you want, I'll come out and do it too. Come out and help you walk through doing it and give you instruction there to make sure you're.
That would be great. I look at those, and I don't know a 3-day egg from a 5-day egg, or that sort of thing. So that's why I say, you know, I'm more than happy to come out and help so that I can see what an experienced person does and how they do it. Because I've kind of gotten attached to these little characters and I want them to do well.
Yeah. So if somebody is doing splits, I mean, I don't know. Making splits of my own, teaching somebody to make splits when I'm trying to get 30 of them done is kind of difficult. But like I said, I'm more than happy to help people go out to their place to do it. And it doesn't take long. You know, you're looking at an hour at tops. You know, and
okay, good. I'll give you a call. And I guess the next question should be, is it like May? Because, you know, I look at a lot of YouTube stuff and I don't have I'm not in an inner circle with people who do bees other than my son, and we're both new at it. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing around May is the time they do it.
But by May, they may have already swarmed on you. This year is a little bit slow. So I normally here in a week or two would have started my first splits. And then about the first to second week of April is when I start doing most of my splits. Like I said, this year is a little bit slow, so I'm not expecting to make splits until the first or second week of April. But what I'm looking for is drones. I want to make sure that I have mature flying drones. That's what's important for me to decide that it's time to split. If I don't see that, then I won't split. So.
Stefan, I want to put a little plug in here. This is also where our mentor program comes into play. So the more mentors we have, are more people that can go out and help with these, helping you with making the splits and stuff like that. So if you know anything about it, willing to help out, it's great to volunteer, and we get more bees in our community that way.
Yeah, I find it also very interesting, Stefan, how just everybody does their splits a little different. So what I do is in spring, when I inspect my hives and make sure they don't swarm, I take one frame out of each big beehive and place it in an empty box, and I make sure, like you do, that I have like all stages of bees on there, especially eggs and young larvae, but also capped brood. And then I just place that in a normal deep box with an extra bottom board, and I just place that frame with the brood on the edge. Then I place an empty frame or a frame that is a little built out in the middle, and then I give them one food frame with like honey and pollen, and then I just cover that whole thing and leave it for 4 weeks, and I don't check at all. And after around 4 weeks, if the queen hatched and mated and came back and lays eggs, then it's all good. And if she didn't make it, I mean, 80% of the bees make it, but there are these 20% that get eaten up by a bird or don't find back home after their mating flight. That's just it. And then I combine two splits if one didn't get a queen. But that's how I do my splits. I take one frame out of a big hive, give them one empty frame, one food frame, cover the lid, cover the entrance, because they have trouble defending. So you make with a foam, I just put a foam in and have the entrance where my brood frame is, because that's where they defended the best. And then after 4 weeks, I check it, and if they made it, and I was a laying queen, and she's laying worker bees, so that's good. Then each week I just give them an empty frame that I place in the middle, and then I feed them with sugar water. And every week I give them a new frame, sugar water, and so on. And then in like 6 weeks or so, you have like an entire deep box built out, and then you put a second box on it, and then maybe you'll get some honey out of that if you're lucky, if you started in early spring. So that's how I do it.
I'm not out in Cold Springs, but Martha had asked if people were new what pollen was bringing in. The tan pollen might be some sort of sage or elm, and then your yellow, the yellow stuff is probably some sort of maple. It's hard to say because I don't know what's around your area, but if anybody else has any ideas about what that might be.
Yeah, seeing a lot of the bees coming in with the tan and light. It's like a light cream color, actually. So I know some of the willows are starting to put some pollen out. My maple hasn't actually put out anything yet. I always check to see if there's any bees in it. But they're bringing in a lot. So wherever they're getting it from, I'm happy.
I think this time of year it's willow, antelope brush, and the Russian, got the black Russian locust thing. The name of that?
Russian olive.
Yeah.
Black locust. Black locust.
Okay, so pollen coming in is a fabulous sign. That means your queen is laying. So you're starting to get that build out. So one of the questions earlier was when you put another box on. So as Stefan said, you really have to wait until you're seeing this queen laying a lot. You know, the pollen's coming in pretty much all the time. We don't have much nectar flow right now, which, especially if we hit a cold spell, which is happening tonight through Thursday, you may actually have to give them some sugar water, because right now they're living on the edge of their resources in there, unless they've got a lot of extra honey that they haven't got to. And if a honey is sitting there in the hive, it is ice cold. It's actually a heat sink taking away the heat that they're trying to generate. So I've got several frames that I had from last year. I set them out during the day. Bees come out, they're cleaning these frames out. I take them back in at night so that they don't freeze up, and I bring them back out. So my bees are actually foraging right now, and they're getting some honey nectar type food. You know, it's like other forages are out collecting the pollen. So they need both of those. So if you don't have any frames with honey on them for those bees to eat, they are basically gonna starve to death if we hit a full week of not being able to get out. You know, unless they've got some really good resources. So in the past couple of newsletters, I mentioned you got to lift that box from behind and see how much it weighs. If it's starting to get light, you're definitely going to have to feed them until we get a good nectar flow. And then also when to put that box on. So queen, she may lay a full side of a frame. Okay, so that's one seam, as Stefan was saying. Another frame, she lays that side. Another seam. You're gonna wait till she's got, you know, 7, 8 seams filled with brood, because once that brood starts hatching, the little bee climbs out of that honeycomb. That bee needs 5 times the amount of space that it had when it was in that little comb. So just think of that. You know, your queen's starting to lay a bunch of eggs. As soon as those all start hatching, and a worker bee is 21 days. Okay, so like I mentioned, they're an insect. They go right on the calendar. After the queen lays a worker bee egg, 21 days later, you've got a new bee coming out. So at the height of the season, when she's laying 1,500 eggs a day, 21 days later, you're going to have 1,500 bees a day hatching, needing 5 times the amount of space that they had when they were in the comb. So watch how many frames are getting filled up with that brood, and that's going to tell you when you have to put a new box on. And also, if you put a new box on with just blank frames that are not drawn out, you're probably going to have to feed them some sugar water so that they can draw out the honeycomb, because they can't store any nectar until they have honeycomb to store it in. And if the queen has laid in all of the open spots, they can't store any food. Okay. Another thing I like to say is that it takes 7 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So if you're giving them a whole bunch of just blank frames with, you know, the plastic dimples on them, but nothing drawn out, you're going to have to give them some sugar water to draw those out. So this is actually more of something that we'll be talking about in May. You know, getting the bees ready to actually start collecting honey. But there you go, a little teaser for a future meeting. Okay, Stefan, back to you.
Yeah, if you decide you're going to start feeding your bees, I would feed them, you know, a quart or two at the most. And the reason is you don't want to overwhelm them. So you want them to have it available if they want. I have one hive that I'm feeding right now just because it's kind of small, but they're taking so little, and the other hives have no interest at all. I have an open feeder just to kind of judge right now, and they just don't have any interest in doing that. So just feed them a little bit that way, you know, and then just check it. You know, it's just to keep them tight, just to smooth out the flows. You know, it's not to, you don't want to. This time of year, you're not trying to get them to put on honey weight. You're trying to get them to just have an even flow of resources. So,
right,
that makes sense.
And to grow new bees. So yes, if you give too much, you know, you just put quarts of sugar water on, it's a signal for the queen to just start going all out and laying. And then we hit a cold spell, and you know, if you don't have enough of the nurse bees, the young bees in there to keep every
I think Jim froze up.
and survive.
So somebody had asked for this again.
Actually, what I was looking for is that one where you had the days broken down, that one that was half the screen, or that slide that you put up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll have to, give me just a moment. I have to pull it back up.
So while Stefan's looking for that, somebody had a question about the yellow jackets. We had a real bad time last year. I don't know, it just like there were just more wasps than I could care for. So yeah, if you know you have wasp problem in your area, put out those traps now. The queens are going to be emerging and looking for new homes, and you want to get those as soon as they start looking, because that'll put a big dent in the population of wasps that we'll encounter this year.
That show up for people who want to look at that again?
Not yet. You may have to get Mark to let you share. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I just had to hit share.
Oh, okay. All right, great. It's up. Yeah, so take a picture of that on your phone, because like I say, those days are very, very important.
Anyhow.
Thank you.
All right, is everybody good?
Okay, well, thanks, Stefan. That was a great presentation.
Welcome.
All right. Oh, I like the clap that you put up there, Philippe. I guess somewhere down there is those little little icons we can do. I don't know where they are, but oh well, okay. All right, anything else people have questions on?
What about mite treatment for the spring? I've got those Avalar strips or whatever they called. I put those in the fall or just before winter. And do I do anything between now and whenever with the mite treatment? Let's put some more strips in of different kinds so they don't get accustomed to the same ones, or what's the deal, please?
Okay, Stefan.
So you could use a soft chemical like oxalic acid. I know that Deborah does the vapor, and that stuff works good too. Really, at this point, they're building up so much, it's not much of an issue. Really, if they've made it through winter, their mite loads are pretty low. And so, and they're going to be building so exponentially right now that mites are not really your problem. Starting May, you'll want to start doing mite washes, see where they're at. I did treat most of my hives in December with oxalic acid when they had no brood, or January, but that's because I had a lot of mite problems last year and I wanted to make sure to kill them. If you aren't having any mite problems and your hive survived, I would just wait until May, start doing your mite washes. Make sure you don't, if you find any mites, then do an oxalic acid treatment or a hop guard treatment, something like that. I would not use the Apivar strips right now because those are in for 42 days, and then you have to give your hive 2 weeks before you can start doing put your honey supers on, and then so you're looking at 2+ months, and at that point you've missed half of the spring flow. So I mean, it's your call, but I personally wouldn't use any hard chemicals right now. If you need to, like if you're seeing signs such as deformed wing virus, stuff like that, I'd use a soft chemical like oxalic acid, or vapor or dribble, and then or like hop guard, because that's only in for 2 weeks, and in 2 more weeks you're fine to go. So,
or even the formic acid.
oh yeah, formic acid. Formic acid is a little harsher, but that does give almost 100% kill. Now is a good time to use that if you decided you needed to, because you want the daytime temperatures to be in the 50s, but you don't want it to get above 80 degrees. If it gets above 80 degrees, you'll fry the hive. And those take 2 treatments of, I think, 7 days is the way they do that.
Are there some instructions on how to do that?
Yeah, each of those treatments come with instructions on how to do that. If you're wanting to do the oxalic acid dribble, I would recommend looking up Randy Oliver's The Scientific Beekeeper, and then his website setup is unorganized as my brain feels most of the time. So it does take a little searching, but he does have really nice tables in there for figuring out the level of oxalic acid to sugar water that you use. That is where the vapor comes in handy. It requires an organic mask to use, but it, Deborah knows more about that if she wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, so in the fall, I use the Apivar strips like you had, and keep those in just before the winter. And usually on a nice warm day so that I don't freeze, I'll go in January, middle of January, like I did a few weeks ago, and do a vaporization. And it does require, the vapor tool to do that. If you plan on doing that treatment, then it's a good investment. I think they're like $65. But I've been using mine forever. So it's quick and fast. You just need a battery to kind of tote to your hives if they're on site. And, you know, it only takes like 2 minutes per hive to do. So you don't have to crack the hive open. You're not disrupting them. It's very unintrusive. So you're in, you're out. They don't even know what's happened. But yes, you do need a good quality mask that you can get like at Home Depot or a paint store, someplace that, you know, you want to get that protection, because that stuff is nasty when it vaporizes and you don't want to inhale it. So make sure you're not doing it on a windy day. Yeah, it's just the best. And I can treat my hives in January in the middle when it's cold, and they're not bothered by it. And I try to space it out like every 11 days if I feel that there's an issue with the mites, and then I don't have to do it again until, like Stefan says, you know, when the mite loads are then a problem in the summer.
Yeah, and
And
proper filter and proper mask with the filter. And the filter is actually not sold in most paint stores because it's actually acidic, which you don't deal with that on paint stores. That's one of the comments about paint stores. Most of them they do not sell those.
right, the special filter that fits on the side of that mask.
Correct.
Okay, I saw something about oxalic acid drip. A couple of weeks ago when the weather was really nice, I went in and you know, did my 5 mil drip per seam. And I just did kind of the center where all the bees were congregated, where I knew that I had my brood lay. Because a couple of the sides, there was like hardly anything going on, so I didn't put anything on there. But I felt pretty good about getting it in to get the season started, to make sure my mite load was going to be as close to zero as I could. Randy Oliver's scientific beekeeping page has a great Excel spreadsheet that you can put in what mite load you have. He usually starts with the mite wash, and then the various treatments you put in and when you put it on, and it then maps out what the mite load will be in 2 to 3 weeks, because he has programmed in you know, how fast they replicate. So it's a great website. It's got the recipe for making the oxalic drip, and you know, you can buy oxalic acid crystals at pretty much any hardware store. It's also known as wood bleach, and most of the wood bleach is, you know, 99.5% pure. You can get pharmaceutical grade online if you want, but I've always just gone with the wood bleach.
And somebody just asked in the chat if the oxalic acid also treats the tracheal mite. So I'm not so sure about it. I only did the dribble, and I like the dribble a lot. I still have to do mine. And the beauty of the oxalic acid at this time of year is the oxalic acid cannot penetrate wax. So as soon as you have capped fruit, the oxalic acid will not do much anymore. In contrast to formic acid can penetrate wax. So you might want to keep the formic acid for a little bit later in the spring when you already have capped fruit. So I will also still do my oxalic acid dribble maybe next day.
Right. And both the oxalic acid and the formic acid can be used on a honey flow. Okay, any other questions? Because I see we're coming up on 8 o'clock here in just a bit.
Oh yeah, just one more thing to formic acid, because there is a risk to kill the queen. So at this time of year, you might not want to do formic acid because you might end up with a dead hive then.
Okay. All right. So Mark, is the recording also catching all of the chat information?
Yeah, it's catching all the chat info.
Okay, all right,
be
great.
able
So
to-
anybody who put in there, if they wanted to be on a swarm list, or what area they wanted to do, or if they were gonna have nukes for sale, that's all in there. Great. And otherwise, if you didn't put it in there, you know, just send it to the Bee Club's email. And I believe that was nevadabeekeeping.org. It was up near the top.
NevadaBeekeepers@gmail.com.
@gmail.com. Okay, great. Thank you.
And even if you did put that in the chat, you still might want to send an email just in case, because Zoom sometimes does what it wants and may not keep all this. So.
Okay, good point. Any other questions? Suggestions, comments?
I have a comment very quickly. So I know we talked about being a mentor. I don't know if we addressed for those that wants to be mentored. So we got people for men. So I don't know how you want to address that, Stefan.
Yeah, so if somebody is looking for a mentor, just email me at the email I put in there. I'll put it back in there. And then what I need is contact information. So I'll need an email address, obviously, which I'll have, phone number, and an address so that I can link you up with somebody that's near you. The first year I didn't get addresses. I just said for areas, and it didn't work out so well. So an address also so I can link you up with somebody nearby. And then it's something that one of those things that as I have mentors available, I set them up. So yeah.
Oh, and Jim, we were going to talk about next meeting, opening it up early so that people can sort of chat in the forum before the meeting starts.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Mark, you'd be the one, I guess, opening it there.
Yeah, so we're looking at so we start normally at 6, so about 5:30. I'll open up the Zoom meeting. Anybody has questions, we can just jump on, and there'll be a few of us here to help answer questions, and feel free to ask any questions you have. We have no problem taking those.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for attending.
Good meeting.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Jim.
And
Thank you.
let us know how those splits work.
Thank you.